No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. They've got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and, of course, iHeartRadio. We are the only 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, all cannabis, all the time broadcasting network on iHeartRadio. Also, go to the website, timeforhemp.com, and find your favorite program host, and you will also find archives that you can download for free of all the programs that we create here at Time for Hemp. We also got a newsletter you can check out once a month. Gets sent out to you if you subscribe. And we're growing marijuana live on the website. Lots of free cartoons to add to your blogs as well. And we are putting a spotlight today on what's going on some of the ballots around the United States. And we're stopping by in Canada. And my joint host today is Darryl Cotton. Good morning, Darryl.
Good morning, Casper. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And you got a groovy company called Indigrow. You want to tell our audience just a little bit about that?
Thank you. I'd love to. Indigrow is an induction grow light manufacturer. We manufacture induction grow lights that we sell all over the world. It uses an electrodeless lamp developed by Nikola Tesla back in 1891, and we've tailored it to provide plant spectrums that make it a very sustainable practice in terms of growing indoor, not just cannabis, but all plants, that flower especially, for less wattage, less heat, and a 10-year warranty on the lamps and drivers. So, it's a fixture that you'll put in and it'll last a long time over your plants.
And you've been with our family for a long time now, Darryl. You have been a sponsor of the network and a guest of the show quite a bit. And you got a business there, Indigrow, and it's right there in California. And you have a real horse in this race, don't you?
I certainly do. And it starts to spawn other opportunities. And with cannabis, I've been someone that's enjoyed growing them, cannabis plants, since the late 70s. I've learned a lot over the years in terms of how we can optimize crop production with less water, less power, fewer nutrients, organically, and I like to bring that to the table for our food production as well. So we started an organization called 151 Farms, and that stands for a pound of cannabis per 5 pounds of food for one community. And because they're sustainable practices, we're soilless, we use aquaculture systems that are going to allow the fish waste to power up the plants for their macronutrients. And for here in California, for example, where the drought conditions are at historic levels, it's really something that is gaining more and more attention because we only use 5% of the water to get those crops to harvest. So 151 Farms is one of the things we'll be talking about today. And I'd also like to introduce our guest that we're inviting, Sean Kiernan. Sean is with the Weed for Warriors Foundation. And as 151 goes, we like providing opportunities for everybody, including the homeless, hard to employ, the veterans. Naturally, we've got sitting with me today on this call some Marines that have been attracted to our 151 Farms and what we're doing. And while we introduce everybody, I just want to let you know that we're a strong believer in trying to bring the community to these gardens and not make them barriers to entry. I feel like cannabis is something that we can utilize to open up more opportunities rather than less.
Absolutely. And why don't you and Sean have that little discussion?
Sean Kiernan's the national president of Weed for Warriors. And Weed for Warriors is a group that is striving to get veterans' rights for cannabis as a way of taking the cannabis as a medication over opiates. And we certainly support that as a 151 farmer. We're trying to grow organically and not use any synthetic nutrients. In your case, we see historic levels of suicide rates and problems with veterans reintegrating into society. Sean, hopefully you can tell us a little bit more eloquently what it is exactly Weed for Warriors can do for our veterans.
Great. Thank you guys for having me on. The Weed for Warriors project was started by Kevin Richardson up in the Bay Area. At that time, I was working with Dr. Sue Sisley with Vets for Dr. Sue Sisley, and she's the professor at the University of Arizona that was terminated for her studying cannabis and PTSD resistant vets. So what we do on the national level is we advocate not only with the VA, but our politicians, both on the national and state level, of why cannabis is good for our veterans, not only our veterans, but you see the kids with epileptic seizures, Crohn's disease, etc. And so when the Weed for Warriors is veteran focused, we kind of view the mothers fighting for their children as warriors. Jack Split out of Colorado just died. He was the student who was attending for the first time school because they allowed him now to administer cannabis in school. So we see a lot of warriors out there. So the Weed for Warriors project is on the national level, a group that's fighting for the rights to self-medicate, freedom of choice, away from the pharmaceutical approach that is accepted. On the local level, what I call our boots on the ground is we have chapters throughout the country and in Australia, and we're starting one in England, where we basically develop these groups, these support networks that help veterans on the local level. And in states like California, where we can administer cannabis and not be in trouble, we get cannabis from growers and extract artists, and we deliver free of charge on our monthly meetings. Every local chapter has a monthly meeting. We have them in LA, we have them in San Diego, we have them in OC, we have them in San Jose, Oakland, and we have these groups get together and they hand out bags of free medicine, from cannabis flower to oils to cartridges and vape pens to effectively CBD-only products to rubs that our amputees love. And so we're trying to bring on the community level, the community together to help our veterans where our government's failing.
Well, that's an honorable mission, and it's ongoing. I mean, it's one of those things that every time you turn a corner, it seems like they're trying to restrict your rights. And I've been growing since the 70s. I find that, we're in historic times here with the states starting to see opportunities to license and regulate and control recreational and medical cannabis. One of the reasons I know that's so important, and we see it here locally, I'm fortunate to have two Marines here as my guests in studio that have had personal experiences with how the VA's handling or not handling veterans who have immediate needs, difficulty reintegrating, maybe they're not seen, and their response to that is often, catastrophic. They're taking their lives. I'd like to introduce Zachary Carrillo. Is Carrillo, is that right?
Carrillo, yes, sir.
Carrillo, and you were a Marine. Where were you stationed?
Yes, sir. I was in Camp Johnson, North Carolina for the majority of my time in.
Okay, and you're now out?
Yes, sir.
You were mentioning about a recent occurrence here at our VA where a veteran was there and he was prescribed a lot of opiates and he couldn't get, it was just a spiraling death sentence for this guy. He couldn't deal with the opiates.
Yes, sir, and he eventually committed suicide in front of the VA's office. So, Mr. Sean, my question would be, how would you say that prescribing him marijuana instead of opiates would have helped lessen the situation, or at least have medicated him in a better mental environment?
Is there? We're not saying cannabis can be the one-size-fits-all fix, but what's happening now?
Let's talk about this. Yeah, let's talk about this. I think it's a great question. When we look at the environment out there that veterans are facing, we have two issues. The suicide issue, which we've talked about, 22 a day, over 8,000 vets killing themselves a year. That's 7% of the population that we represent.
Accounting for higher, isn't it?
Of the, well, yeah, I'll get to that in a sec. These are the numbers that the VA's come out that account for 20% of the suicides. So 7% of the population accounted for 20% of the suicides. Now, how we label suicides, we had a vet who took his car and drove 100 miles an hour into the side of a brick wall and died, and they classified it as an accident. So, the number's high. Whatever you want to apply to it, it's high. Now, the other issue, which no one's talking about, is the overdose issue, and that is when you get to the opiate issue. And cannabis, actually, 2 studies have come out, and basically Dr. Colleen Berry from Johns Hopkins, and what they did from 1999 to 2010, they looked at states where cannabis had been legalized. And what they saw was a 25% reduction in the overdose rate when cannabis is available as a choice. So
that's huge.
That's huge. The other issue is Dr. Mark Anderson, Dr. Rees, and Dr. Sabia published a study in 2014 in the American Journal of Public Health where they looked at males, and they said between 20 and 29-year-olds in states that had legalized cannabis, they saw a 10.8% decrease in the suicide rate. And between 30 and 39-year-olds, they had seen a 9.4% decrease. So we do have data that suggests, on top of the Medicare data that just came out that showed in states that have been legalized, our elderly were choosing cannabis over pharmaceuticals at an ever-increasing rate. So we do have the data, and it's being suppressed. It's not being talked about by the popular press. So with regards to your friend and with regards to your issue, we're seeing it. It's a horrible situation. What we're seeing across this country is the pharmaceutical companies are in bed with the medical system, with the VA hospital, spending billions of dollars to buy pills like OxyContin. And so anytime you have that kind of money being spent, just like the cigarettes were for years and years and years, the CEOs, there's nothing wrong with cigarettes. There's nothing unhealthy about cigarettes. They will lie to you because a lot of people are making a lot of money. So if you're talking about your friend cannabis, we don't know if it would have saved him. But what we are saying is if 1 out of 4 people, we had 47,000 people overdose in 2014, of which 24,000 were from opiates. Now, when we look at that 24,000 number, 14,000 is prescription opiates, 10,000 is non-prescription opiates, heroin. So the prescription opiates are killing our brothers and sisters at a higher rate than the heroin, and yet all we hear about is the heroin. So what they're doing is diverting our attention to this heroin scare when the real issue is the opiate pills. And what we do know, if you take that 25% rate and you applied it, we're talking about 6,000 Americans just in 2014 that would be at the table this Thanksgiving with their brothers and family. Now, if you take the suicide rate at 42,000 suicides in 2014 and apply to 10% just on average rate, you're getting 4,200. So just between suicides and overdoses in cannabis states, if everyone had legalized cannabis and those numbers hold true, 10,000 lives saved every year. And that's what this means. So we're talking about real numbers. Think about what we did in 9/11. We sent all these brothers and these wonderful people overseas to fight a war because we lost less than 3,000 people and we spent $5 trillion. We don't have to get into whether the war is good or bad, but that was our reaction to losing less than 3,000 people. We're talking about saving 10,000 American lives each year, 3 times the number, more than 3 times the number. Why aren't we doing it? And we're not doing it because cannabis prohibition makes a lot of money for a lot of people, from not only the pharmaceuticals, not only the jails, not only the politicians, not only the rehab companies. And if you look at all these doctors and you look at all these people out there arguing for prohibition and follow their money and their ties, they're almost inevitably being funded, getting paid, or have ownership interest in one of those groups making a lot of money off cannabis prohibition.
So isn't it funny that after 70 years of imprisonment and wrecking lives, destroying families, now you have a government here in California and other states that's considering making it all better. All of a sudden, with the flick of a switch, they will regulate, control, and tax the very product that for years we've all fought, based on some of the laws going medical, a certain amount was deemed accessible and legal to have, but if you were to exceed that, then or take it over a state line, you're going to be arrested. And in Sean's case, I believe that's exactly what happened, right? A year ago?
Yeah, I am unapologetically a felon under the laws of this country. I lived in Rancho Santa Fe in San Diego. In that house, I was not growing. I had less than a half a pound of cannabis. The DEA, along with the task force in San Diego that included multiple agencies, and I can explain why they include multiple agencies if you want, raided my house at 7:05 in the morning on, I think it was a Tuesday. Before my kids went to school, I have 4 kids. They could have waited and said 8:05 we're going to go in after the kids going to school. They had been following me with a GPS locator on my truck. And by the way, I had no prior record, no prior history. I'm not involved in anything else. I didn't find anything else in my house. And they raided my house, guns drawn, and I pleaded guilty before even a hearing because our system set up, to spend a lot of money to fight these things, to cannabis, the possession of cannabis with intent to sell.
In your case, though, that's exactly what you were doing, and so it's kind of hard to argue those. In my case, I do have a 151 farm here, and that again stands for a pound of cannabis for 5 pounds of food for one community. So I'm out there. I do radio, TV, print. I let people know, please leave your bias at the gate and come in here and see what it is we're doing, because water is the new oil. You cannot deny it. If you're big ag, big pharma, if you're at the VA and you want to push back on medical cannabis or even recreational cannabis, it's all going to come down to who's growing that plant and how. And I don't care if you're a multi-acre Philip Morris or you're a guy with 5,000 square feet as a small grower. You're going to have that water available. I do believe the narrative has to change, and I am not ready to accept blindly, with a casual review of AUMA, this Adult Use of Marijuana Act, that we should just hand over all the work that we've done over all these years to a government that doesn't really understand or even have the policies in place yet to put an infrastructure together that's fair to not only our generation but future generations of cannabis users. So this is a very important event. How does Sean Kiernan and We for Warriors feel about AUMA? Specifically, what would you like this audience to understand from a veteran standpoint? What does AUMA represent to you?
AUMA, or Prop 64, as it called. Let me just verify. I was shipping cannabis out of state. I don't apologize for it. I was shipping it to veterans free of cost if it was mine, or at cost if I had to get it, but it was started out free of cost. So they did intercept 18 pounds. They have a picture of me at Kinko's mailing it. So I pled guilty. So you're right. It is different, and I take full responsibility for what I was doing, and I'm unapologetic about it. With regards to Prop 64 and AUMA, and all that was done before I joined We for Warriors, just to clarify. But with regards to Prop 64, we believe Prop 64 will be a disaster for disabled veterans that count on cannabis to medicate, whether it be PTSD or you're an amputee with regards to pain, and in many cases both. It's also going to be a disaster for the poor. And much of the reason it's going to be a disaster is it does set up a legal framework for cannabis within the state of California. But that legal framework is really going to be accessible only to people who have means. And so those people who don't have means, and most of these disabled vets are sick or poor, don't have means to go pay, whatever the dollar amount's being, and it's going to be more because of these taxes, the black market is going to provide the medicine for a lot cheaper. And so they'll be forced on the black market, and the prohibitionists, meaning the police state, they are not going to stop enforcing marijuana laws. And in fact, they're going to get more aggressive because they're going to be funded by the taxes raised, and they're going to go after the black market. And the people in that black market, for the most part, are going to be people who are diverting cannabis sale outside the state, or people who are growing it and providing the poor, or the people who want to access it at a cheaper price. So, yes, AUMA is going to turn our veterans and the poor and the sick into criminals, and that is a very big concern of ours.
As it should be. So have you read the entire Prop 64 bill, end to end?
I have read the whole entire Prop 64 and MRSA, and I've read it multiple times, and it is a interesting bill trying to please a lot of different people, and usually when that happens, it doesn't end up as a good result.
No, so most bills, really, to make it something effective, has to be able to be read by a normal person and understood. And what I find when we get into 62 pages in a behemoth bill like this, it's an all-or-nothing vote. It's up or down. And we have to make a lot of decisions, or one decision based on a lot of complex issues. So I'm going to be looking for areas in that law that are inconsistent and that are compromising aspects of what it is that they're saying. So what I would like your audience, or this audience, to know is that on 151farmers.org, we have an analysis of the bill. And it's done in the format of the bill, we make a table of contents, which doesn't exist with the bill. But with the table of contents, you can quickly find an area that it is that we're going to be talking about. And the reason I point that out is because there's a multitude of reasons they put in this bill to pass it. But those reasons do not outweigh the negatives, okay? And those negatives are the fact that you're forever giving up all your due processes under a cultivator's opportunity here. You just basically have to make yourself available to any time whatsoever a opening of the door and showing of all your records. We don't have a problem with that, but the problem is when the government is giving this unchecked authority and they can hit you with $30,000 per incident fines when they can basically shut you down at will because maybe the guy up the street has more money or more influence. They're going to be doing that. And they're going to be doing it using other tools, water being one. If you don't have the water rights from the local authorities, you are a lower priority than the watershed, which it would be, the fish, the wildlife. If there's not enough water for them, you're certainly not going to get it. So your crops are going to suffer. We don't really talk about that until you really dig into the details of the bill and you see that the water rights authorities, water being the new oil, are what's going to regulate who gets access to these licenses just to begin with. So if you go to 151farmers.org and you look at the AUMA analysis, you'll see not only what I just talked about, but you'll also see hyperlinks to the areas within the bill that are so important to understand, like pesticide limitations. We need to know what these pesticide limitations are so that we don't exceed them. Well, they don't give you those. They say that the EPA still considers cannabis as a Schedule I drug, so the EPA hasn't provided that guideline. So the state goes, well, then the State Board of Pesticides should be offering those guidelines. And the State Board of Pesticides has not issued those either. So at what point do you finish a 100-pound grow and you want to sell it out there in the wholesale distribution market that this law allows, and you don't know whether or not you've exceeded those limitations? If you have, then that crop is lost. You cannot sell it. So these are questions that we answered before we agree to the bill. Even the fee schedules. If I want to be a cultivator of a 5,000 square foot property, what's the fees? They can't tell you that in this law. So I am not going to sign a contract where I don't know the details of the contract. Ask any lawyer who's for this bill if he would sign a contract that he does not know the details of the contract, such as, how much is it going to cost? The time limitations.
Yeah.
None of that's established here.
Well, and it's important for people to understand the following. When you hear people say, you hear both sides say the opposite side, and you're like, who's telling the truth? And like most political discussions, there's a grain of truth in both. But one of the big things you hear is it undermines Prop 215, and the for AUMA side says, it absolutely doesn't undermine Prop 15, and they point to language that says nothing in here should be construed as a means to undermine any law, related to 215. And you can take an extreme example and say, well, it says related, not 215 itself. And some people like Letitia Pepper say that, and that's one interpretation. The other interpretation on the other side is MRSA puts a lot of things into the law that would be found unconstitutional in the state of California, much like SB 420 with their plant count limit.
Can you tell the audience
to understand? MRSA is the medical side regulation that was passed by the Assembly and the Senate and signed into bill by Jerry Brown last year. And what's important for people to understand is the proposition process in the state of California. For example, let's take Prop 213, the real estate bill, where once you buy a house, your property taxes are basically capped at the value you purchase the house. So people like Warren Buffett own these $1 million houses in Orange County and pay $1,000 a year in property taxes. And that's just a guess, but that's a story that's played out throughout California. Now, to change one of those propositions, much like Prop 215, the Assembly and the Senate and Jerry Brown can't touch it. So they can't pass a law that violates that proposition because a voter-passed proposition is superior to anything they say and anything they pass. So anything they pass that violates 215 will be found in violation. Well, there's much in MRSA that would be found in violation. And so, but now if AUMA passes, that is the latest voter-passed initiative, and therefore they can point to that as superior to 215, and therefore anything in MRSA or AUMA that violates 215 is therefore not a problem because the voters now approved AUMA. So I like to keep it big picture because getting too into the details, you lose people. But that's the biggest thing people need to realize. We are giving the power back to the Senate, back to the Assembly, back to the governor to regulate cannabis. And so therefore, everything in AUMA and MRSA could change next year because they could change it. And they can absolutely change it to take rights away, and they could change it to add rights. And a lot of what's going on in my discussions with people like DPA is it's an interpretation issue. There's ambiguity, like you said. And the problem isn't what it says or what it doesn't say. The problem is it really can be interpreted any way you want, and then that power is going to be in the marijuana czar that's appointed by the state. So you have this situation where it's a lot of unknown. And so people have to ask themselves that care, do you want to give the power back to the state? Because once you do, you are undermining Prop 215, even if you believe nothing in AUMA or MRSA really changes access to medical cannabis. I don't particularly believe that, but even if you believe it, at a minimum, the power shift has changed, and the power now AUMA gets the power back to the state to basically write laws and change laws as they see fit, and therefore they can change it and take rights away.
What can we do? I mean, in terms of educating everybody and talking about this, that's an important step, and because most people will look at this and it's just too long and boring and they won't understand it. So they're going to take a casual observation if they even do that, or they're going to listen to the media and their friends, and they're going to say, "Oh, recreational, we want to see that." What do you recommend we do? I mean, I've got veterans sitting here right now, and they're horrified by what they're hearing in these losses of rights.
They should be horrified. And the biggest issue we have is money. Unfortunately, money is what makes this country go round. And what we're seeing is, and anyone who saw the Hillary or Trump, what's going on with them, but let's just take Bernie Sanders and Hillary. The institution, the Democratic Party, is behind AUMA. So therefore, all the writers at I've had discussions with the writers at the LA Times, at the San Francisco Chronicle, and they all say the same thing. Yeah, basically the Dems are the Democratic Party is behind UMA, so that whole power network is behind it. So what we're fighting is that. So what it takes is a grassroots approach in the last 65 days to 70 days here to fight and get the word out there. And people
I want to propose we start with water being the new oil, okay? We are at historic lows. If you look at, what's going on in our aquifers, there's just not enough water. There's really no reason we should even be in Southern California with the water availability. And these licenses are going to be predicated on having a permit to take water to be able to run these crops. And if that's not even in play, then the license means nothing.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because let's talk about the black market. So people like Gavin Newsom in his editorial in the Modesto Bee, where he first argued about supporting AUMA, he came out and talked about the black market, that we're basically the black market is bad for the environment. My own university, the University of California, Berkeley, where I went to school, wrote in the Daily Cal that you got to vote for AUMA because it's going to stamp out illegal growing. And I sat there like my head spinning. I went to business school. I worked on Wall Street, so I understand economics really well. And they're either lying or they don't understand basic economics. I can accept some social, welfare major at the University of California, Berkeley, not understanding that this is not only going to help on the black market in terms of the illegal growth, it's going to probably exacerbate it. But when I hear someone like Gavin Newsom, who wants to be our president, obviously either not understanding or lying about it, and this goes to your water point, it makes no sense. AUMA and Prop 64 is most likely going to make the black market bigger, not smaller or eliminate it by any means, unless you do one thing, take an authoritative and kind of clamp down with the police, punishing people growing in the black market, which now takes away, as they argue, the benefit of the judicial system, that we're going to jail less people and we're going to become a friendlier state in terms of nonviolent drug offenses, in terms of someone just growing marijuana or et cetera. So there's this catch-22 that they're saying a lot of things that sound good, but when you delve down even a foot, it doesn't pan out. And so what we see with this is any time with the significantly increased regulation you're going to provide, the taxes you're going to put on this thing, the cannabis you buy in these legal dispensaries is going to be significantly more expensive than what a veteran could get down the street. And to give you a story that I had, and this goes to your water issue, it's not going to help water at all. this is actually going to make things probably worse, because now what you're going to do, you're going to increase the cannabis consumption market dramatically in California. And so the black market's going to go out, probably increase. So therefore, all the benefits that they're arguing you're going to see environmentally are not going to occur. And then you're going to have the legal market, which gets to your water rights issue, that it's a major issue. So give you an example in Colorado. I was in 2014, never been there in terms of visiting the dispensary. I went and sat down at the sports bar. And I was talking to him, and he said, yeah, there's a dispensary 6 blocks down, 1 block this way. Go to this dispensary, because I wanted to see one. He goes, well, why are you going to go? I said, well, I want to get some medication. California, I have a license. He goes, don't even do that. Buy it here. You buy it at the hot dog stand across the street. Everybody's selling. And by the way, this green crack, you can get at the dispensary for $80 after taxes for an eighth, or I'll sell you an eighth here for $25. That is what's coming to California. So understand that a lot of these arguments that are happening, and unfortunately, it scares me that it's happening by politicians who eventually want to be the president of the United States, defy basic economics. And so I think that gets to your water issue is not only is the legal market going to be screwed up in terms of the water rights, but more importantly, the benefits that they're arguing you're going to see from this AUMA Prop 64 are not only not going to pan out, they're most likely going to be exacerbated.
Well, with that said,
I have 2 ways of responding to that, because the illicit market will obviously not want to pay their taxes. They're not subject to 280E, the federal withholding deductions. That is, they don't get hit by any of that, because it's an all-cash business that ignores the legal framework, as it were. But on our AUMA analysis, we do a model of a $60 eighth, and when we apply the new taxes, excise sales and local taxes, that turns that into a $84 eighth. So we basically added $24 for 40% based on a very modest assessment of what the adders will be to implement this, giving the black market anything other than, it's not subjecting them to eradication. It's actually helping promulgate them and get them to
exactly my point.
Well, let me drop in here. I need to do a commercial, and then we're going to pay our bills, and then come back and pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Indigrow is your source for affordable induction grow lighting. First discovered in 1891 by Nikola Tesla, Indigrow lights deliver 11 years of electronic sunlight to your plants. Indigrow lamps require less than half the power of traditional HID lamps. Converting to Indigrow lights means you'll cut down on your power bill with less lighting. Indigrow lamps also use 5 times less mercury than traditional fluorescent or HID lamps, making Indigrow not only energy efficient but environmentally friendly as well. No more switching out lamps between vegetative and flowering stages. As nature intended, your lights get a steady dose of UV light. That makes your plants grow healthier and stronger. Indigrow products are manufactured in San Diego, California, and come with a written 10-year warranty. What Tesla knew, then growers know now, is that Indigrow lighting is the cost-effective addition to your victory garden. To learn more or order now, go to inda-grow.com. That's INDA-GRO.com. Or call 877-452-2244 to answer any of your questions. These guys really know lights. Indigrow really is your sunlight in a box.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, a fitness writer, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Like many of the million people who are living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every single day. And sometimes my nerves are so raw that if you brushed up against me in an elevator, I'd scream. I can't sleep at night from the pain, and sometimes the spasms in my legs are so intense they will wake me up throughout the night. I've tried the strongest prescription medications available, and I'm going to tell you, they do not work. And in fact, they leave me in a stupor, and most of the time, it's impossible to even live your life. Now, I've tried medical marijuana, and I'm going to tell you something, it works. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
Herbal healing, herbal healing. This Naya man singing his song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. This Naya man singing his song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. What I see and I observe, no chemical, it is a natural herb. Go spread the word, it calm your nerve and soothe your mind when you feel disturbed. With my Congo drum, singing my song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. To hypocrite and parasite, while you are fight against the tree of life. You know hear how much people are living a pain and it make them sleep at night. With my Congo drum, singing my song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. This Congo drum, singing my song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon, Solomon. Give all your vote, while millions are dead when them inhale the smoke. You take away their herb passport. This Naya man singing his song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. This Naya man singing his song. You better listen to the Rasta man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. This is a spiritual and herbal war. Won't make you no lock down your friend run bar. Alcohol and kill more people by far. So divine intervention I am calling for. With my Congo drum chanting this song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the grave of King Solomon. This Congo drum singing my song. You better listen to the medicine man. Legalize the herb, we heal the nation. Found on the tomb of King Solomon, Solomon.
Yes, legal herb has got to be the only way people can get their medications without having to go to jail. That's what we're working for. It's making certain that when you go to get your prescription filled, when you walk out the door from getting your prescription filled, you are not arrested, but you are greeted by friends who are happy to see you get healthy. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint chat back to my joint host here on the Big Joint Broadcast. Darryl?
Welcome back, everybody. Darryl Cotton here. I'm with Indigo and the 151 Farms, and I have Sean Kiernan on the phone. And my two in-studio guests are Matt DeLeon and Zachary Carrillo. Both are Marines and veterans, and looking at what we do here as 151 Farms as a way to increase public awareness of urban gardens and how we can take this unique opportunity to combine cannabis and food production for our inner cities. We got to hear from Zachary a little bit. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're a local here in San Diego, right?
Yes, gentlemen, I sure am. I'm also, like I said, I'm a vet right now currently, and I'm one of the proud members of cannabis use, and I find that I do get a lot of benefit from the medical prescriptions that, because once I got out, I wasn't able to receive my prescriptions from the VA anymore, and once I was able to get prescription through legal cannabis, I was able to self-medicate and be able to integrate successfully into society as a civilian.
So you said the VA wasn't treating you. Had you had issues like post-traumatic stress or other combat-related injuries? That you
mainly like a lot of anxiety and depression issues that we were going through that were just things that were caused by military and personal events.
And what did the VA offer you?
At the time, there were just a lot of lines and a lot of documents that were just not being just either not getting addressed or getting lost, and pointless phone calls and emails. And before I know it, it was just better to look for other sources.
Now, we have other Marines that have been through here and other branches of the Department of Defense, and they come back, a lot of times with prescriptions with opiates where the cure is often worse than the disease. So if they were to self-medicate with cannabis, how does the VA treat that now, guys? Have you been given sort of like a pass, or are they against it? What's the official position? And that's to either you. I've got Matt and Zachary here. Zachary.
Well, I wouldn't know the actual VA's official position. I wouldn't want to talk for them, but I believe that right now.
I can tell you.
Yeah, and if you're more educated, boss, I'd rather have you speak up for it.
Yeah, what do we know there, Sean?
Yeah. Basically, it's been evolving, and so out of the let's give kudos. It has been evolving. It used to be it affected your benefits. Basically, now where they're at, if you use cannabis and they will urinalysis you. Anytime they give you a drug, you cannot get pain medication. So, for example, if I go to the VA tomorrow on my back and I say I'm in pain, they will urinalysis you. If you come back with cannabis in your system, you will not be prescribed pain meds. That is where it's supposed to be at. Now, does that mean there's some VA facility in Indiana where they have conservative doctors that aren't following that? Maybe. We do hear about that nationally. But where we're at right now is they're not going to do it. So let me give you an example. We had a Vietnam veteran who had been in 3 helicopter crashes. He was a door gunner in Vietnam, infantry door gunner. He had been using cannabis never, and he had been on pain meds for his back and everything for 20, 30 years, 40 years since I don't know when he went to the VA. We did an interview on his wife. It's not my job, but he did an interview with his wife. And effectively what ends up happening is he ends up dying because he came down with cancer. When he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, he's having a hard time eating and sleeping because of all the stuff he's going through to treat that. He gets introduced to cannabis. It helps in his sleep, and it helps with his appetite. So he starts to medicate with that. He goes to the VA. They test him. You have cannabis in your system. They yank all his pain meds that he's now taking, not only for the stuff he was injured in Vietnam, but the stuff he was going through cancer. And he ends up dying, only being able to use cannabis and his medicines that are supposed to heal him, but he is not allowed access to pain meds. So basically what they've done is put a gun to your head and said, choose pain meds or cannabis. You don't get both.
Wow. Well, that's a tough position to be in. And nobody's saying cannabis is the, one-size-fits-all, but certainly we have more than anecdotal evidence now of its efficacies for pain management and neuroprotectant disorders as an antioxidant and so many other wonderful benefits. One thing I can tell you from a personal experience is I have more and more doctors coming in, and they express their dissatisfaction with the healthcare system. They find themselves to be drug dealers, pushers, and they're not happy working for Big Pharma anymore because the opiate addictions, like if you have people on OxyContin and then you take them off that prescription, what are they going to end up doing? They're going to find black market heroin. And we see that more and more.
Exactly.
So we have a responsibility to everybody, but our veterans especially, because they gave up their lives to go over there and put themselves at risk and leave their families. And then if they come back with these conditions that we can't even begin to imagine, what they're wrestling with, why are we going to deny them based on the politics in play here, the accessibility to a product that can cut into these suicide rates? And I believe you said it earlier, there's a 25% reduction in those states where cannabis is legal for what we know to be, even in the way they describe these suicides, because oftentimes they'll call it an accident. It's not an accident, it's a suicide. But those reductions are real. They're borne out.
Absolutely.
This is an option.
And it's not even that. Let's go beyond that. And Zach and Matt, I think, can talk to this very well. When you get your opiates pulled, it's not as easy as a binary, I don't have them anymore. You're now addicted to opiates. So what's any Marine or sailor or Army vet or Air Force vet or even Coast Guard vet do? They are now in the market, in the black market, getting heroin. Which now exposes them to the overdose issue, which now exposes them to, more importantly, especially in a place like San Diego with Bonnie DeManis, who's taken a very, very, very oppressive view on drugs and punishes them very harshly, especially in a place like California that has a little bit more liberal view. Her view is very negative, and she's punishing these vets. Now, because the VA yanks the medicine, they go to the black market, and they're either caught having to sell drugs to finance their addiction, or they just have drugs on them when they get pulled over, and then they get caught up in the judicial system, and we can talk for hours about the judicial system and how that's failing vets. It's really a system that is, and there's been books written about this, the system is been developed to effectively siphon money away from helping the poor or sick, or in this case, vets who fit those demographics. Let's be real. Most of these vets are not from Rancho Santa Fe or Del Mar or places like that. And they end up basically not only not getting help, but people end up getting rich on them, off them, staying down and put them through the system, whether it be the judicial system, the rehab system, any system you can imagine is meant to do one thing in this country: make money for the owners.
Well, let me ask you, a lot of people, and this is a very well-financed campaign, are endorsing the passage of Prop 64, and they'll claim that if you're against it, you're a prohibitionist. How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, it's just an idiotic statement, and it's like, it's like the statements Trump makes or Hillary makes or many of these politicians make. I think you have to be willing to stand up and saying, screw you. I mean, there's been a few of the hired guns, and we can talk about it, whether it be Todd or Chris, who tried to intimidate us at first when we came out. Hey, we have concerns. And we just laughed at them. I said, yeah, is anyone really going to believe the Weed for Warriors project, who, we gave over $500,000 of cannabis away this month? Is anyone really going to argue that we're prohibitionists? No. And so I think they're trying, what I noticed them is they've been trying all these arguments, and these arguments have been failing. And the more they fail, the more then they just ignore you. And
well, I would also
expand
you. I like the screw you response. Yeah, I'll go a little deeper. I would ask them, why do we have to accept an all-or-nothing bill when there's so many problems with this thing? There's so many unknowns. Why should we have to accept this bill to make them do the right things? If we want sentence reductions, that should not be contingent upon passing this fucking bill. Sorry for my language, Fast.
You don't. No, you don't.
All I'm saying, these are things that we should be doing anyway, and that's our legislature's job. So the legislature is handing off the ball with this initiative, and if it's passed and we hate it, then they're going to say, well, you voted for it. So informing people what is at stake here is our job. And if, unfortunately, this law were to pass, we'll always have the moral high ground, and that we said, we told you so. But we don't want that. We have reasons to get this passed as a way of opening up opportunities for more areas that need them, less barriers to entry. The environmental impacts that this represents are enormous. And if you look at the taxes that'll be piled on, the taxes that, by the way, will also affect the medical patient. And if you look at our ALMA analysis on 151farmers.org, there is a model that shows a $60 eighth going up to $84. And in that model, a 15% excise tax is still applied to the medical patient. It's unavoidable. Well, can they extract that down the road? Yeah, possibly. But how many times does the government roll back taxes? If anything,
And let's touch on that. I think you bring up a great point. I mean, listen, let's have an honest discussion here, because we can't have an honest discussion about much in this country. The honest discussion is, on one hand, they're saying the medical market in California is a joke. It's not medical. Anyone can get a medical card. Well, then we already have recreational weed. If anyone can get a card, and it's true, you can walk in and say, I have a headache, and they give you a card. So all it takes is 20 to 30 minutes of your time. You can do it online. So why do we need this system? Why do we need your system? And the reason that what AUMA is going to do very well, and it's not going to optimize it, because I think if you can charge the taxes you charge, you could raise a lot more money, because then you wouldn't have the black market. You'd capture more of the black market. But let's just say you're going to raise taxes from AUMA. There will be taxes paid to the general fund. What they're used for is a different discussion. But that is what AUMA is about. AUMA is about one thing: raising money for the politicians and the government. And Keith Stroop, president of Normal, founder of Normal, he's no longer the president, said it great in an editorial he just wrote. All AUMA is really about is showing governments around this country how much money you can make off marijuana. And when they see that, prohibition is going to comply. And that's his theory. So that is what AUMA is about. It's about raising money and raising money for the political system so that cash-strapped states around this country have to take a serious consideration about legalizing cannabis.
Well, what's interesting is if you're a local government that decides not to allow some of the elements of ALMA to exist, if it were to be passed, you are no longer eligible for any of the money that would come from those medical bureau taxes. So it's really incentivizing the local governments to get in line and play. They can make more restrictive regulations, but not less. And they're also incentivizing the turning in of black market grows. So if you were to turn in a black market grow, you're eligible for some of what would be recovered under that. Right. And let's take an example of that. We don't know what the fee would be for an annual license for a cultivator, but let's just say it's $500. And what's interesting about that in this ALMA bill, they give you 2 paragraphs that go to quality assurance, and they give you 12 pages that go to taxes. They also haven't addressed any of the fees. They say they're going to be determined later. So here you are going to vote for something you don't even know what your fees are, but you're all marching head on this block wall to get something passed, and you have no idea how the economic impacts are going to be. But again, we'll just say $500 for a cultivator. You're also a retailer, so let's say you got another $500 for the annual retail, and maybe you drive it to your customer, so now you're part of a transportation license. So of the $500 times 3, you would be responsible as a black market grower for that 500 times 3, $1,500 times 3, which makes it $4,500 per day. That is the penalty they will apply to you if you feel like you want to stay off the radar. Well, you're going to be on the radar, folks. It's going to be an angry ex, it's going to be an angry employee, it's going to be a neighbor, it's going to be a competitor. Somebody's going to turn you in. And that $4,500 per day is in law. It's part of the statute. It's not something that they can negotiate away. The other thing they can't negotiate away is the penalties that would apply towards jail and fines. They are at a minimum $500 with 6 months at shall be. It's not maybe. That's in the language, shall be applied. And if you look at the penal code prosecutorial discretion aspect of this thing, they can give you up to 3 years. So there's even more restrictive enforcement efforts to keep people off of black market and get them into line for licensed and acceptable cultivation and marijuana business practices. Okay, and like Sean said, it's all about the money.
Well, and this is important. I want to call Governor Newsom out and the Democratic Party out about this. You know, we hear a lot of the progressive movement, bleeding into the Democratic Party and the war on the poor. We have a war on the poor in this country, meaning they don't have access to the constitutional rights because they can't pay some lawyer $500 an hour to actually defend them. So they're left with a public defender who has 2 minutes to spend on their case, and we have a war on the poor. Well, that poor includes the demographic of veterans, because I know a lot of veterans don't like to admit it, but listen, we have a socioeconomic draft in this country. We don't have kids from Beverly Hills joining the military in general. We don't have kids from Del Mar and Rancho Santa Fe, like I said. So what AUMA and Prop 64 is a promulgation of the war on the poor, plain and simple, because the people accessing the black market are going to be the diverters who are shipping it, but it's also going to be a huge population of people who are growing and buying and using who can't afford $84 eighths, who want that $25 eighths. That's veterans. That's people who are sick and on Social Security. That's just the working guy. That's the working guy who's making $35,000 an hour, can't afford $80 eighths, right? And he has a back pain because he's lifting all day, and he wants to come home at night and smoke and go to bed. I mean, that eighth goes away. So what you have is legal access. When you hear this, I've said this a lot. You basically have legal access for the trust fund kids, which you do. I mean, if you look at all these dispensaries popping up and all these private companies, they're all trust fund kids for the most part. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, right? Because you can't go to a bank and get a loan, so you got to have access to money some other way. So what Prop 64 and AUMA are doing is they're sacrificing California's veterans and California's poor and California's working class to promulgate DPAs and NPPs and normals at the national level. Cal Normal admits at least there's some issues with this thing. Promulgating and sacrificing us with the idea that if the minute California raises $1 billion+ the dominoes will fall. It's the domino theory. That's what these guys are promulgating. And just like the communist domino theory was wrong, I think this is going to be really wrong, and it's going to hurt a lot of veterans, a lot of poor people, and a lot of sick people. And it's important to talk about this because we're not talking about this, and and this is the problem. We don't have access to the media. We don't have access to the LA Times to plant these stories. We don't have access. I mean, they're planting. Go ahead.
We got time for hemp.
Let's go. I love it. No, thank you for.
And we're going to get this out. We'll be on this warpath every single day. People are going to start paying attention. Social media gets out there. There's veterans. There's young people. Maybe they've not really accepted this yet, but they're really not prepared to make a decision, haven't done their own research, because it's very complex. They may not understand the implications of some of these things. But we're here to tell them that don't believe everything that you're being told. Because it's in a nice, pretty, bow-wrapped package doesn't make it the right choice. And this is too important to vote yes on something that will have long-term implications, negative implications as to how we have a relationship with this plant. We're going to do things, and we're going to get this message out. And Time for Hemp is just the start. And folks, just so you know, I met Sean just yesterday, but I give presentations, and we're going to be going all over the state because this has national implications, too. What California does, we know other states might use as a model. And it's horrible for those other states, just as it would be here for California. So we owe it to people to try to get this out, this message out. And I used Sean's letter to Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom in my presentation package because I was moved by it. It stated how AMA was bad for California and bad for veterans. And without knowing him and just liking the message, I put it in our package. And most people that read that letter, which, by the way, is linked on our 151 Farmers AMA analysis page, it's so well written and so compelling, and it calls Gavin Newsom out, and it calls out some of these other organizations, too, that propose to defend the local minority communities, but they have taken the position to approve or endorse AMA, and we can't really understand that. It's just more of the same, piling on to the disenfranchised and disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged communities when they could be using this to turn it around the other way. Is that what you're seeing, too, with other organizations, Sean, such as NAACP, for example?
Everyone asks me about the NAACP because they do trot the NAACP. I mean, listen, what we've seen is this. The California NAACP has come out in support of AUMA. Alice Huffman is the head of the California NAACP, and she's a national board member. She's very politically connected. She's basically a politician in the system, but not elected. She's and she's a wonderful woman. Let me just say, I absolutely adore her, and she really does care. I really. Is there an agenda? She cares.
Is there an agenda?
I think her agenda is to help the inner city. And let me explain Alice Huffman for you. And she may disagree, and I invite Alice to come on.
Oh, no, if she wants to help the inner city, she needs to see a 151 farm. I tell them, leave the bias.
And I want to hook you up with her because I think listen, this is Alice Huffman. So I met Alice Huffman.
She might not actually listen to Time for Hemp, so we'll have to find her other ways.
Yeah. No, she's not going to listen, but I can email her and we can talk about it.
I'm kidding.
But Alice Huffman, this is important. The NAACP portion of this is really important because they trot out, we're going to help, the inner cities. We're going to help the minority communities. Yet what we're seeing is the models that were passed in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington that they champion are not only not helping the inner city and the minority communities, the arrest record for black teens has gone up.
Yeah.
In all those states. And so what's going on? And what's going on, I can tell you that I think Alice Huffman, first of all, she doesn't use cannabis that I'm aware of. She is not a drug person, and she, like a lot of Americans, accepted the drug war as a good thing. And I think over time she realized it wasn't a good thing. And she has been, listen, AUMA and Prop 64 were put together by Jerry Brown, sitting all the constituents around a table and said, figure something out. So you have the CHP and the prohibitionists there getting stuff. You have the NAACP getting stuff. And I think there's a promise that they're going to divert a lot of these funds, these tax funds, to the inner city to help. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need to invest in our inner city. But what I would rather see is sustainable economic models to help our brothers and sisters in the inner city. And I would like to see a decriminalization of drugs in general in the inner city.
Off to let you know that we have gone over an hour, and it's time for us to wrap the show up. And this gives you an opportunity to put a spotlight on your favorite URLs. We'll start with Sean.
wfwproject.org. Visit us. We're a destination website. We're writing about a lot of these things, and we just launched a new website. So come join us and join the discussion.
And Darryl?
Yeah, let's point everybody over to 151farmers.org. Please take a look at our ALMA analysis and look for more of our presentations that we'll be bringing to a city near you.
And I want to remind people out there that we are not just a 1-hour broadcast. We are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all around the clock, all cannabis all the time. And like a good joint, we are always best when you share us with your friends.